Hello, today we're going to be talking about dialogue and monologue. First of all, what is dialogue? Well, Wikipedia describes dialogue as a written or spoken conversational exchange between two or more people, and a literary and theatrical form that depicts such an exchange. As a narrative, philosophical, or didactic device, it is chiefly associated in the West with Socratic dialogue as developed by Plato. A monologue, however, is a speech presented by a single character instead of a conversation, most often to express their mental thoughts aloud, though sometimes also to direct another character or the audience. Dialogue in literary theory is directed towards a particular subject. It's written with a cause. It is meant to drive from one point to another. It can reveal relationships between characters and their motivations because they can set up the way they interact with each other and their beliefs and their ideals. Monologue in literary theory is used sometimes to speak directly to the audience. It is used to show their intentions and motivations within their own speech and reveals their inner thoughts towards either an audience, it can be overheard by other characters. It's mainly meant to signify, like I said, your inner thoughts. It's mostly just you carrying out a single part of it's a conversation just by yourself to get your point across. Some examples of monologue would be Romeo and Juliet. Romeo has a very long monologue. I believe it is in Act 2 where he speaks about the way he feels about Juliet. And this obviously is spoken to the audience. I believe it is overheard by other people, and it reveals his intentions and his motivations towards Juliet as a character. Monologues also exist in where you'd probably be more familiar in terms of Saturday Night Live or late night shows. Typically, before they start, they have a person reveal their intentions throughout the show. They talk about what the show is going to be set up for. There's comedy within these statements, and then the rest of the show will carry on after that. Dialogues, however, exist in just about everything because they're always driven to a point. They're always meant to go somewhere. And it definitely is what drives a lot of stories is dialogue. You have it in Star Wars and any of the interactions that exist, Harry Potter, where we get to see more about characters, the Odyssey, Shakespearean writings. It's everywhere so that way we can understand where we are and where we are going based on these characters' relationships. Um, some differences that exist between monologue and dialogue. Obviously, the amount of characters that are involved, for one. Dialogue is obviously two or more people in order to establish a relationship, and they can typically reveal both parties' actions and their thoughts and their relationship, to one another. But monologues, however, are really only they're one person's thoughts. We only get to hear one of them, and while other people can overhear those thoughts, we only really get to hear that single character's thoughts. So we don't get to see the other perspective of how another character feels because we only get the one character's monologue. If I had to describe it, I would honestly say a dialogue feels more like a two-way street where you can have one um, going one way and the other going the other way, while a monologue is only one-way street because it can only ever go in a single direction. Um, some closing statements about this is obviously to take away the difference between dialogue and monologue, but also to understand about how in old writing, monologue used to kind of exist by itself. It kind of used to feel like a separate entity where you would have these long drawn out statements that wouldn't really exist in conversations or dialogue, I should say. But now you can see a lot of, in a more specific example, if you look at the story Pulp Fiction in the diner scene, where we have our main character deliver a very long monologue quoting from the Bible in the middle of a conversation. He delivers a monologue within a dialogue. And obviously, dialogue is another thing to take away from them as well, is that they are written for a purpose. You kind of want to feel like you are going from one place to another. A stagnant dialogue, everybody can agree, feels boring. If you ever had a conversation with somebody that didn't feel like it was going anywhere, that can happen to writing as well, and writing can suffer from that. You obviously want your dialogue to drive a point across and to get somewhere. Both cases, you want to reveal something about your characters. You want them to reveal their intentions, their motivations, and how they feel about certain things.